The avoidant has spent their entire relational life surrounded by people who pursue them, who try to understand their withdrawal, who explain repeatedly why their patterns hurt, who accommodate their limitations while hoping for change. These responses, while understandable, generate nothing resembling genuine respect from the avoidant. Pursuit confirms the avoidant's unconscious belief that others are needy and dependent. Attempts to understand their patterns feel like intrusion into defended territory. Explanations of hurt register as pressure and emotional demands. Accommodation signals that boundaries are negotiable and consequences are avoidable. The avoidant learns through these typical responses that they can maintain their defended position without cost, that their emotional unavailability will be tolerated indefinitely, that others will adjust themselves to fit the avoidant's limitations rather than requiring the avoidant to stretch beyond their defended comfort. Then the avoidant encounters someone different, someone whose response to avoidant patterns follows entirely unfamiliar logic. This person does not pursue when the avoidant withdraws. They do not attempt to decode the avoidant's defensive structure or explain why it hurts them. They do not accommodate the avoidant's limitations while hoping those limitations will eventually shift. Instead, this person demonstrates through consistent action rather than words that they possess something. The avoidant has spent their life defending against developing genuine self-worth that requires nothing from the avoidant, boundaries that hold regardless of the avoidant's response, capacity to walk away from what does not serve them without looking back. The avoidant watches this person choose themselves with calm certainty, maintain standards without defensiveness, live well without needing the avoidant's presence or validation. This response triggers something in the avoidant that pursuit and accommodation never could. Genuine respect rooted in recognition that this person possesses internal strength. The avoidant lacks self-possession. The avoidant has never developed freedom. The avoidant's defended position prevents them from accessing. The avoidant may never articulate this respect, may never act on it in ways that restore the relationship, but they carry it as permanent reference point for what strength actually looks like, for what self-respect actually means, for what they lost by remaining defended against someone who demonstrated through every action that they deserved more than the avoidant could provide. When you maintain your boundaries without explaining or defending them, the avoidant has become accustomed to people who set boundaries accompanied by lengthy explanations, justifications, and defenses against anticipated criticism. These explained boundaries communicate uncertainty, suggest the person setting them is not fully confident in their right to have limits, invite negotiation, or push back from the avoidant. When someone explains why they need a boundary, they implicitly communicate that the boundary requires justification, that its validity depends on whether the explanation is compelling enough, that the avoidant has standing to judge whether the boundary is reasonable. This uncertainty gives the avoidant power to dismiss the boundary, to argue against it, to suggest the person is overreacting or being unreasonable. When you maintain boundaries without explanation or defense, you communicate something entirely different that the avoidant recognizes at an unconscious level as genuine strength. Your unexplained boundary states, through its very delivery, that you do not require the avoidant's agreement or understanding to honor your own limits. You are not seeking permission to have boundaries. You are not asking the avoidant to validate that your needs are reasonable. You are simply stating what you will accept and what you will not, holding to those limits regardless of the avoidant's response. This self-authorized boundary setting demonstrates internal locus of validation that the avoidant, who requires external positioning to maintain their defended self-concept, recognizes as superior to their own approach. The absence of explanation or defense also prevents the avoidant from engaging in their typical pattern of dismantling others' boundaries through debate. When you explain your boundary, you provide the avoidant with material to work with. They can question your reasoning, suggest alternative interpretations of events, argue that your needs are excessive given their limitations. The avoidant's intellectual capacity allows them to find holes in almost any explanation to generate alternative frameworks that make your boundaries appear unreasonable. When you provide no explanation, you eliminate this entire dynamic. The avoidant has nothing to debate, no reasoning to dismantle, no justification to challenge. Your boundary simply exists as fact that the avoidant must either respect or reveal themselves as someone who violates others' stated limits. This unexplained boundary setting forces the avoidant to confront that your limits are not negotiable, not dependent on their agreement, not subject to their approval. The avoidant cannot argue you out of boundaries you have not bothered to justify. They cannot convince you that your needs are unreasonable when you have not presented your needs as requiring their validation. They face your boundary as immovable reality that exists independent of their perspective. And this immovability commands respect even from someone whose defensive structure typically resists all external influence. The avoidant also recognizes at some level that unexplained boundaries reflect genuine self-knowledge and confidence. People who thoroughly understand their own needs and trust their right to have them do not require extensive justification for their limits. They know what they need, know they deserve to have those needs respected, and communicate limits with a straightforward simplicity that comes from internal certainty. The avoidant, whose defended position prevents them from developing this kind of self-knowledge, encounters in your unexplained boundaries something they unconsciously recognize as more evolved than their own perpetual self-doubt masked by defensive rigidity. Your refusal to defend your boundaries also demonstrates that you are not invested in changing the avoidant's perception of you. When people defend their boundaries, they reveal that they care whether the avoidant sees them as reasonable, that they want the avoidant's approval even as they set limits. This desire for approval while setting boundaries creates contradiction. The avoidant can exploit. Your lack of defense communicates that the avoidant's opinion of your boundaries is irrelevant to whether you maintain them. You are not setting boundaries to get the avoidant to see you in a particular way. You are setting boundaries to protect your well-being, and whether the avoidant approves or disapproves does not factor into your decision to honor your own needs. The avoidant experiences this approach as a refreshing departure from their typical relational dynamics. They have spent their life with people who seek their approval while trying to set limits, who justify their needs as if those needs require permission, who defend their boundaries as if boundaries are attacks requiring justification. Your unexplained, undefended boundaries communicate that you do not need anything from the avoidant. Not their understanding, not their agreement, not their validation. This independence from the avoidant's perspective or approval represents exactly what the avoidant claims to value, yet rarely encounters in others. The consistency with which you maintain unexplained boundaries also earns the avoidant's respect in ways that flexible boundaries never could. When you state a limit and hold it regardless of the avoidant's response, regardless of their attempts to test or push against it, regardless of how their behavior might make you feel, you demonstrate reliability in your relationship with yourself. The avoidant watches you honor your own stated needs with the consistency they cannot provide in their relationships with others. This self-consistency represents integrity. The avoidant's defended position prevents them from developing, and they recognize it as strength even as their patterns prevent them from emulating it. Your unexplained boundaries also force the avoidant to take responsibility for their choices in ways explained boundaries allow them to avoid. When you explain why you need a boundary, the avoidant can focus on debating your reasoning rather than examining their behavior that necessitated the boundary. When you simply state the boundary without explanation, the avoidant must look at their own patterns to understand why the boundary exists. If you state that you are no longer available for inconsistent contact and offer no justification, the avoidant must examine their own inconsistency rather than examining the reasonableness of your need for consistency. This forced self-examination, while uncomfortable for the avoidant, generates respect because it refuses to let them externalize responsibility for their pattern's consequences. The avoidant may never tell you they respect your unexplained boundaries. They may respond with apparent indifference or with attempts to characterize your boundaries as cold or rigid. Yet, beneath these defensive reactions, the avoidant carries awareness that your boundary setting reflects strength they lack. They recognize that someone who can set and maintain limits without seeking approval possesses self-worth that does not depend on others' validation. They understand that your refusal to explain or defend demonstrates confidence in your right to have needs and assert them. This recognition creates respect that persists even as the avoidant's defensive structure prevents them from acknowledging it directly or responding to it by changing their patterns. When you let them go without trying to make them understand, the avoidant has experienced departures characterized by final attempts to make them understand, lengthy conversations explaining how their patterns hurt, detailed letters outlining what went wrong, emotional appeals trying to help them see what they are losing. These understanding-focused departures communicate that the person leaving still invests significant energy in the avoidance perspective, still hopes that proper explanation will create the insight that leads to change, still orients toward the avoidant's internal experience rather than toward their own well-being. The avoidant experiences these attempts to generate understanding as final expressions of neediness, as evidence that the person cannot fully release them, as confirmation that even in leaving the person remains focused on the avoidant rather than on themselves. When you let them go without trying to make them understand, you demonstrate complete emotional release that the avoidant recognizes as rare and powerful. You are not leaving while simultaneously trying to remain connected through the project of helping them understand their patterns. You are not maintaining psychological entanglement by making your departure contingent on whether they finally grasp what they did wrong. You are simply leaving, redirecting your energy entirely away from them and toward your own life, releasing them so thoroughly that whether they understand or not becomes irrelevant to your forward movement. This complete release represents emotional maturity the avoidant has never witnessed in their departures from others. The absence of attempts to generate understanding also communicates that you have moved beyond hope, that insight will create change in them. When people try to make the avoidant understand, they reveal that they still believe understanding will lead to transformation, that if the avoidant could just fully grasp their patterns, they would choose differently. Your decision to leave without this final attempt at understanding demonstrates that you have released not just the avoidant, but also your hope that they will change. You are no longer invested in their development, no longer concerned with whether they learn from this experience, no longer orienting toward their growth or healing. You have genuinely moved beyond them in ways that trying to make them understand would contradict. This approach forces the avoidant to sit with their patterns without the distraction of managing someone else's attempt to help them see clearly. When people try to make the avoidant understand, the avoidant can focus all their energy on defending against the understanding being offered, on arguing with the characterization of their behavior, on resisting the insight being pushed toward them. Your departure without this attempt eliminates the distraction. The avoidant cannot argue against understanding you are not trying to create. They cannot defend against insight you are not trying to generate. They sit alone with their patterns, with the fact of your departure, with the absence of your continued investment, even in helping them understand why you left. The avoidant experiences this as more destabilizing than departures accompanied by understanding attempts because it highlights the finality of your release. When people try to make them understand, the avoidant recognizes that those people remain psychologically connected, still caring deeply enough to invest in the avoidant's comprehension of what occurred. Your lack of this attempt communicates that you have genuinely stopped caring whether they understand, that their internal experience of the relationship's end is no longer your concern, that you have released them so completely that even their understanding or lack thereof does not matter to you. This complete indifference to their perspective represents rejection more profound than angry explanations or hurt accusations ever could. The respect intensifies as time passes, and the avoidant realizes you never returned to try to make them understand, never reached out to explain further, never attempted to reestablish connection under guise of helping them see what they lost. Your sustained absence and complete lack of understanding attempts confirms that your release was genuine rather than strategic, that you truly moved beyond them rather than hoping your departure would motivate their pursuit. The avoidant faces that they encountered someone strong enough to fully let them go, and this strength commands respect that efforts to make them understand never could have generated. When you live well without needing their validation or return, the avoidant has encountered countless people who claim to have moved on, yet demonstrate through subtle behaviors that they remain emotionally tethered. These people date new partners while making sure the avoidant knows about it, achieve successes while ensuring the information reaches the avoidant, build new lives while leaving channels open for the avoidant to observe or re-enter. The avoidant recognizes these patterns as continued attachment disguised as moving on, as strategies to make the avoidant miss them or regret losing them. These performances of moving on generate no genuine respect because the avoidant understands they are performances, that beneath the appearance of thriving lies hope that the avoidant will notice and return. When you live well without needing their validation or return, you demonstrate something entirely different that penetrates the avoidant's defended awareness. You are not performing wellness for their benefit. You are not strategically displaying your thriving to make them regret their patterns. You are genuinely invested in your own life with such complete focus that whether the avoidant observes, approves, or regrets becomes irrelevant to your experience. This authentic living, untethered from the avoidant's awareness or response, represents freedom. The avoidant claims to value yet rarely witnesses in people who were once attached to them. The avoidant recognizes authentic thriving through its lack of performance quality. When people perform moving on, their actions carry slight desperation, subtle attention to whether the avoidant is witnessing, underlying hope that the display will generate desired response. Your genuine wellness lacks these qualities entirely. You pursue interests because they fulfill you, not because you want the avoidant to see you as fulfilled. You build relationships because they enrich your life, not because you want the avoidant to know you have replaced them. You experience joy because your life generates joy, not because you are trying to prove to the avoidant that you are fine without them. This authenticity registers in the avoidant's awareness even when they cannot articulate what makes your thriving feel different from others' performed recovery. Your genuine wellness also demonstrates that the avoidant was not as essential to your life as their defended ego required them to believe. The avoidant's self-concept has incorporated belief that people who were close to them will struggle significantly after loss of the avoidant's presence, that the void the avoidant leaves cannot be easily filled, that their unavailability was preferable to their complete absence. Your visible thriving challenges this belief. You demonstrate that life without the avoidant is not diminished, but rather enhanced, that removing their inconsistent presence created space for consistent wellness, that their absence allowed you to flourish in ways their defended distance prevented. This recognition deflates the avoidant's grandiose belief in their own importance, while simultaneously generating respect for your capacity to thrive independently. The avoidant also recognizes that your wellness reflects self-sufficiency they claim to value but have never genuinely developed themselves. The avoidant's defended independence is reactive rather than authentic, existing primarily as protection against vulnerability rather than as genuine capacity for autonomous flourishing. Your thriving demonstrates actual self-sufficiency, the ability to generate your own satisfaction, to create meaningful life independent of romantic partnership, to maintain emotional stability without requiring another person's presence or validation. The avoidant sees in your genuine wellness what their defended position was supposed to provide but never actually did: real independence rooted in internal resources rather than defensive protection against depending on others. Your lack of need for their validation or return also eliminates the avoidant's unconscious hope that they maintain significance in your emotional world. The avoidant may not want to return to the relationship, may have no intention of changing their patterns, yet they typically retain belief that they could return if they chose, that the door remains open because their former partner continues carrying beneath whatever boundaries they have established. Your genuine thriving and complete lack of need for them closes this door permanently. The avoidant recognizes that you have not left the door open, have not maintained hope for their return, have not organized your healing around possibility of reunion. You have genuinely moved forward into life that no longer includes space for them. This permanent closure, while potentially painful to the avoidant's ego, generates deep respect because it demonstrates psychological health and strength the avoidant lacks. The avoidant's defended position prevents them from truly releasing people even as they push them away. The avoidant maintains imaginary connections to former partners, keeps them in psychological orbit, preserves belief that reconnection remains possible. Your complete release, evidenced by your genuine thriving without need for them, shows capacity for healthy endings that the avoidant has never developed. You can both care about someone and fully release them when they cannot meet your needs. The avoidant recognizes this as psychological sophistication that exceeds their own capacity. Your visible wellness also serves as mirror reflecting what the avoidant sacrificed through their defensive patterns. The avoidant observes you building rich, satisfying life and recognizes that this could have been life you built together had they possessed capacity for genuine presence. Your thriving highlights the opportunity cost of their emotional unavailability in concrete terms. The avoidant sees not just abstract concept of what they lost, but actual manifestation of life that was available to them, but their defended position prevented them from accessing. This visible demonstration of what they sacrificed generates respect mixed with regret that no explanation or conversation could have created. The respect intensifies as the avoidant recognizes that your wellness does not diminish even when circumstances become difficult. The avoidant may unconsciously hope that challenges will reveal your thriving as superficial, that difficulty will expose continued attachment to them, that adversity will drive you to reach out for support you once sought from them. When you navigate challenges with the same self-sufficiency you demonstrate during positive times, when you build support systems that do not include them, when you handle difficulty without needing them, the avoidant must acknowledge that your wellness is fundamental rather than circumstantial. You have genuinely developed internal resources and external connections that make their presence unnecessary rather than simply pretending to be fine while secretly hoping for their return. Your complete lack of need for their validation or return also communicates that you have processed the relationship and integrated it as completed chapter rather than ongoing story. The avoidant recognizes that you are not stuck in the past, not organizing your present around what the relationship was or could have been, not maintaining hope or bitterness that would indicate continued psychological entanglement. You have done the internal work to release them fully, to accept what occurred, to extract whatever learning was available, and to move forward without needing them to validate your experience or participate in your continued journey. This psychological completion represents emotional maturity that generates respect, even from someone whose defensive structure prevents them from achieving similar resolution. When you match their energy instead of pursuing their potential, the avoidant has built their relational approach around others, compensating for their limited investment, around partners doing emotional labor for two people, around others pursuing while the avoidant withdraws. This dynamic has allowed the avoidant to receive relationship benefits while providing minimal effort, to feel desired without requiring reciprocal desire, to maintain defended position, while others work to bridge the distance that position creates. The avoidant has learned that their withdrawal typically generates increased pursuit from partners who interpret distance as challenge to overcome, who invest more heavily to prove their worth, who mistake the avoidant's unavailability for depth requiring persistent effort to access. When you match their energy instead of pursuing their potential, you disrupt the entire dynamic the avoidant has organized their relational life around. The avoidant offers minimal emotional investment, and you offer equivalent minimalism. The avoidant creates distance, and you maintain that distance rather than attempting to close it. The avoidant withdraws, and you allow the withdrawal to stand without pursuit. This matching eliminates the compensatory effort the avoidant has relied upon, forcing them to experience relationship at the actual level of investment they provide rather than at the elevated level others create through their excessive effort. This energy matching communicates something the avoidant rarely encounters, that you are responding to their actual behavior rather than to their potential, to what they demonstrate consistently rather than to what they could theoretically become. The avoidant is accustomed to people who relate to them based on intermittent glimpses of capacity. The avoidant displays during moments when their defenses temporarily lower. These people invest heavily based on potential they perceive, hoping that sufficient investment will help the avoidant consistently access the capacity they demonstrate occasionally. Your matching of their actual energy announces that you are not investing based on potential, but rather responding proportionally to what they consistently provide. The avoidant experiences this matching as both uncomfortable and deeply respecting. The discomfort emerges from the avoidant facing relationship at the actual poverty level their defended position creates rather than at the artificially enriched level others' excessive effort generates. The avoidant must confront that relationship with them when others stop compensating for their limitations, feels empty and unsatisfying. This confrontation with the actual quality they provide forces recognition their defensive patterns typically allow them to avoid. Yet beneath the discomfort, the avoidant respects that you are holding them accountable through your behavior rather than through words, that you are treating them as responsible adult capable of deciding their own level of investment rather than as project requiring development through your superior effort. Your energy matching also eliminates the avoidant's ability to blame relationship dissatisfaction on your excessive needs or demands. When you pursued while they withdrew, when you invested heavily while they offered minimally, the avoidant could characterize the imbalance as stemming from your neediness rather than from their withholding. When you simply match their energy, providing exactly what they provide, the imbalance disappears and the poverty of the relationship becomes undeniably the avoidant's creation. The avoidant cannot claim you want too much when you are wanting only what they want, cannot suggest you are demanding when you are demanding nothing beyond reciprocation of the energy they themselves offer. This matching forces the avoidant to recognize that healthy relationship requires mutual effort rather than one person compensating for another's defended withdrawal. The avoidant faces that relationship cannot maintain itself on the minimal investment they provide. That connection requires sustained effort from both people, that their pattern of minimal investment only worked because others were providing double the necessary effort to create appearance of relationship. Your matching demonstrates that you will not be that compensating person, that you require actual reciprocity rather than accepting to do all the relational labor while the avoidant benefits from your effort without providing equivalent investment. The avoidant also confronts that their defended position becomes immediately visible when someone stops compensating for it. While others pursued and overinvested, the avoidance patterns remain somewhat obscured by the imbalance others created. The relationship appeared to function even if poorly because someone was doing sufficient work for two people. When you match their energy, the avoidance patterns become starkly apparent. The avoidant sees clearly that they create distance, offer minimal presence, withdraw consistently, provide insufficient investment for sustainable relationship. This visibility eliminates the avoidant's ability to maintain that their patterns are subtle or that others exaggerate their emotional unavailability. Your energy matching demonstrates self-respect that the avoidant recognizes as strength they lack. You are refusing to overfunction in relationship, declining to sacrifice your needs to accommodate theirs, maintaining boundaries around your own investment that mirror the boundaries they maintain around theirs. The avoidant watches you honor yourself by refusing to give more than you receive, by insisting on reciprocity rather than accepting one-sided effort, by treating yourself with the respect the avoidant fails to provide. This self-honoring behavior models what the avoidant has never learned, that self-respect includes refusing to participate in dynamics that require your depletion to maintain someone else's defended comfort. The respect your energy matching generates stems from the avoidant, recognizing that you possess clear sense of your worth and refuse to accept less than reciprocal investment. The avoidant has encountered many people who claim to know their worth, yet demonstrated through their behavior that they would accept minimal investment, that they would overfunction to maintain relationship, that they would pursue despite receiving little in return. Your matching of energy rather than pursuing potential proves that your stated standards match your actual boundaries, that you will not betray yourself to maintain connection with someone who will not invest equivalently. The avoidant respects this integrity even as their defensive structure prevents them from meeting the standard of reciprocity you require.